This video is all about the legacy of one Ric Flair. In recent years, the legacy of Ric Flair has undergone what some would say is a negative transformation, to word it nicely. A lot of things have come out story-wise about Ric Flair. Ric Flair himself has done a number of things. Really, with this video, what we're going to do, Bonafide Heat and myself, we're going to go through Ric Flair, for starters, his general legacy real quick as far as what he's known as in the wrestling business. Then, real quick, go through, from Kevin's perspective, what Ric Flair means to culture and just society in general as far as a pop culture figure. And then, Kevin, it's going to be a deep dive as far as how Ric Flair's, we'll say, gone off the rails for the sake of saying PC. So, Kevin, I'll throw this to you real quick. I mean, what do you want to say about Ric Flair to start us off, pal?
Well, if we're going to talk about what Ric Flair means to culture, Ric Flair, to put it simply, he's the cool wrestler. That's the way I interpret him in pop culture. As Snoop Dogg said, he's an official member of the black community. So that's Snoop Dogg's words, not mine. Don't quote me, pal. He's hip hop's favorite wrestler. He invented swag in a lot of respects. Like Ric Flair was popping bottles, putting models in a limo before anyone was doing that. Before any rapper, any movie star, any athlete. Ric Flair was the first one. He was the first guy to be flashing his flashy sneakers, his watches, his hair, his sunglasses, the $800 alligators, the $2,000 suits, the $10,000 rollies, taking girls on rides for Space Mountain. Ric Flair and his legacy, it extends to multiple generations for a couple of reasons. One, he's your grandma's favorite wrestler. He's your grandpa's favorite wrestler, your father's maybe your father's favorite wrestler, depending how old your parents are. And then he's now he's doing appearances, like he'll be at the Atlanta Falcons game, hyping up the Falcons, or he'll be doing first pitches at baseball games. And he's recently in music videos. He's been in music videos with rappers, with Bad Bunny, with Offset, and he's had a song named after him that really enlightened him to a generation of people that didn't know him, to the younger generation. Anyone that knows the song Ric Flair Drip, they probably didn't know who Ric Flair was. And Ric Flair is like one of the wrestlers that's acceptable in culture. He's like John Cena. He's like The Rock. He's like Hulk Hogan. Well, I think he's more renowned than Hulk Hogan nowadays. But yeah. And another part, too, of Ric Flair's legacy, and I'll close with this. His legacy in general is the guy that carried non-WWE wrestling. I think that'll always be his legacy to hardcore wrestling fans, to Southern-based wrestling fans. That would be Ric Flair's true legacy when it's all said and done. That he was the guy, he went to WWE, but he didn't need WWE to be a famous star.
Pretty much, yeah. That's a big one with Rick. Real quick with his, the wrestling side of things. Ric Flair, just generally within the wrestling industry, when you ask guys, Stone Cold Steve Austin's the main example I think of. When you're asked who's the best wrestler of all time, guys from the Attitude Era, most of them do say Ric Flair. When it comes to who's the best wrestler of all time, who's the GOAT, so to speak, in wrestling. So he's highly renowned as far as in the business, what he did as far as the charisma, the selling, how great of a world champion he was, touring as the face of world-class championship wrestling, or generally WCW, the NWA, with their title, obviously, all the stuff in the 80s and, the 90s especially. Ric Flair, Kevin, you allude to it there. The face of non-WWE. You look at all time as far as other guys who fall into that basket. I mean, you think of, I guess, Sting, potentially guys like Diamond Dallas Page, Booker T, not so much. Maybe Kurt Angle, his TNA run. There aren't too many guys who are known that actually were in Ric Flair's kind of boat with that. So, Kevin, I guess I'll throw this to you now. Anything else as far as the wrestling side of Ric Flair, or do you want to get into a bit of a mini hit piece as far as Ric Flair's legacy, recently?
I mean, we're going to do a whole podcast or we already did a whole podcast about the good side of Ric Flair. I think we have to talk about Ric Flair nowadays in the last 2 to 3 years. Really what Ric Flair has been doing has been, I don't want to say he's tarnishing his legacy, but he's not doing his legacy any favors by the way he acts on social media, some of the outlandish things he's done, some of the actions towards WWE, claiming the man, trying to say that Becky Lynch is not allowed to say the man, trying to sue Vince McMahon for ownership of the words the man. Yeah, that was really, I guess, the beginning of it all, right? I think that's the earliest really known example that we have of Ric Flair starting to kind of be a little bit out there.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, because it was that was really the main one. That from memory was 2019, I believe. It was about 2 years ago.
Yeah.
When Becky Lynch was like on fire in 2019, Rick just kind of comes out of nowhere, really. Because Ric Flair wasn't really at that time, 2019, doing too much of really note from memory, and then he comes out with that, which is all. Oh, that's nice. I'm trying to sue WWE and Vince McMahon over the tagline, the man. Just with that stuff with Becky Lynch, that's kind of carried on till this year as well. Ric Flair just bringing up Becky Lynch, like Ric Flair doing like rants on Becky Lynch in interviews, that type of thing. It's like, okay, this is Becky Lynch having success and calling himself the man has definitely bothered cheeky old Rick, old devil. But yeah, any other thoughts on the whole Ric Flair Becky Lynch situation, Kevin? Because it does seem odd with someone of Ric Flair's status in pop culture, his resume, his legacy, where it is, that he'd feel the need to make such a scene over something so trivial. I mean, WWE nowadays, these Raw shows Becky Lynch was starring in were getting 1.9 million viewers. So, I mean, for Ric Flair to make such a scene, Kevin, going a bit loopy, question mark?
Maybe, perhaps he's not on his medication or something like that. It's really an odd scenario because, like, what did he think was going to happen? Say he does win that lawsuit, he does win possession of the man. His whole thing is that he wants Vince McMahon, he wants WWE to pay him for that. Well, I don't think that's going to happen.
Mm.
Yeah, he said, "Oh, you gotta be the man. To beat the man, you gotta be the man." Whatever, his whole famous catchphrase. But he could have trademarked that like 25, 30 years ago if he really cared that much about it.
It's like you just an old one. Obviously not like the absolute end of the world. It's one instance, Kevin. And we're not going to try and derail his whole legacy over that or anything. And then you've got Kevin. Do you want to talk about the Dark Side of the Ring stuff from last year?
Yeah, this really took a hit on his legacy. This is the main thing. Like, yeah, he attacks Becky Lynch and it's kind of like this old man is like, "Oh, get off my lawn," to the younger Becky Lynch, and it's coming off as like a creepy obsession too. Considering that he was involved in a storyline where he was in love with Lacey Evans, it just doesn't help that he's always attacking Becky Lynch. And maybe that's just him working because he knows Becky Lynch is Charlotte's best rival. So on a positive note, I would hope that that's what it is. But yeah, talking about Dark Side of the Ring, this was a clear-cut, agenda-filled episode of Dark Side of the Ring, where they talked about the plane ride from hell. And they really painted Ric Flair as his victim. Like, he was the one that got all the blame. And, you had Tommy Dreamer. For those of you who haven't seen the episode, Tommy Dreamer's defending Ric Flair's sexual assault, basically. Comparing Ric Flair's sexual assault to him wearing a ponytail at 50 years old. So that wasn't a great look. It just, all around, it just felt like there was a heavy agenda. And did it get to Ric Flair? Like, yeah, like some people on Twitter, on social media would be like, "Oh, Ric Flair is this, he's that." So you don't really see the 100% overall love for Ric Flair the same way that you'd see for Stone Cold Steve Austin or Rock or Shawn Michaels, Kurt Angle, guys like that. But at the end of the day, I think it's really just on Twitter. I think in pop culture, a lot of people aren't aware of the things that Ric Flair has been accused of, So I don't really think his legacy is in the dirt or in the mud, if you will. It's not like Hogan. Like Hogan, that's pretty widely known. Most people know, if you know Hulk Hogan as a casual viewer, most of those casual viewers know that Hogan is not a good guy now. It's kind of acknowledged that he's not a good guy.
Yeah. And that's the big thing about Hogan, because I mean that legacy, that reputation is in the gutter, and it has been for over a decade now. It's as I said, widely known with Hogan that man's hardly appreciates everyone equally. Kevin will say that, and then you look at Ric Flair. And it's like, okay, obviously, yes, Dark Side of the Ring. Let's call it like it is. It's a Vice series. It's heavy left-wing propaganda, cancel culture-driven agenda. That's essentially what it is. The show is nowadays made to divulge people into, on Twitter, freaking out trying to cancel someone. That's what the past season was. Previous seasons were far more objective as far as just explaining exactly the dark side of wrestling. This past season, a lot more of the stuff about canceling and cancel culture and riling up Twitter has it achieved its purpose in that sense? Absolutely. This Ric Flair example is a perfect one. What Ric Flair did and all that type of thing, disgusting. Justified all the negative backlash for that story. For every part of that that's valid, it deserves every part of the backlash and all that type of thing. Not justifying that for a second, just calling out Vice for what the show is. Ric Flair, that wasn't good for his legacy, but at the same time, Kevin, you raised the point before. How much of this is wrestling Twitter, outrage culture, cancel culture, the mob running with their pitchforks to try and set someone else on fire, then run to the next person and set them on fire? How much of it's that? And how much of that actually affects how he's viewed in mainstream pop culture by people who don't know any better?
Yeah, it doesn't make a dent. I don't think it makes a dent with Ric Flair. I think Ric Flair's legacy is still intact as like a top 10, top 5 overall performer in wrestling history. I guess the question that should be posed here is, should Ric Flair still be viewed that way? Knowing the allegations that we know against him, like, it's kind of a complexity that I find myself battling with internally, where I at one hand, I'm not the biggest Ric Flair fan. I didn't grow up with him. He's not really in my generation, but I do appreciate what he's done in pop culture and the way he's kind of became relevant again in the late 2010s.
Yeah.
So it's like, should we as wrestling fans, should we be praising Ric Flair? It's really complicated.
Well, I feel like that's the kind of conundrum you have, and this isn't just a Ric Flair thing. There's that many people of stature, status throughout society, throughout culture, who are extremely successful in their given field, be that in sports, be that in music and entertainment, be that pro wrestling, be that politics. So many people have had Ric Flair, a big time career, great legacy, widely known. I'll give examples. People like Eminem, for instance, like that. Like you look, behind the scenes, like stuff of his life, it's super messed up. It's a lot of the stuff that's happened with him. It's like, oh my God. But like he gets known as the best rapper of the generation. That's how they one of the best rappers ever. And you look at Ric Flair, he's just widely known as the cool wrestler, the wrestler's GOAT, so to speak. And a bunch of the stuff which we're mentioning here doesn't really get generally mentioned and brought up with that because the mainstream don't know any better. And it's kind of just is what it is, Kevin. Like, you want to dig deep beneath the surface of Ric Flair and just say he's a scumbag, a bad person. He did X, Y, and Z. He did this to this person on the plane. He said this and this, and he's done this X, Y, and Z wrong. In the 80s, he snorted a line of coke off this person and all this type of stuff. Yes, like that's all happened, Kevin. But I don't know. It depends who you ask, doesn't it? Like,
yeah, that's the thing. It really depends who you ask. And really, like, I guess the best way to answer this is to say that nobody has a perfect legacy or a perfect persona. Everyone makes mistakes. Right. Everyone makes errors. So to sit there and like pretend that you're better than someone else by attacking them for their mistakes, I think it's more of a reflection on the person doing the attacking than it is on the person receiving the attack.
Hold on. So as someone who's 28 years old, jobless, sitting at home on Twitter 8 hours a day, leaving hateful, toxic tweets about someone like Ric Flair, you're telling me that's more on the hateful, toxic person? Is that what you're telling me?
That is what I'm telling you.
Nice. Continue.
That is exactly what I'm telling you. I guess, we could kind of wrap it up here. Just closing thoughts. I think Ric Flair, at the end of the day, he's, like we said, he's still regarded as like a top 5, top 10 figure in wrestling. And I don't think he's cancelable. I think he's at the level of like a Dave Chappelle. Dave Chappelle's a prime example. The cancel culture mob, they came swarming for Dave Chappelle, not once, but twice in the past 3 years. People were boycotting Netflix this year, threatening walkouts, and Netflix put their line in the sand and said, no, Dave Chappelle brings us money. Nothing he did was ethically wrong or on the court of law. He didn't break any laws. And it's just kind of like there's certain people you can't cancel. And Eminem is a good one, too, that you bring up. Because I remember last year, in this craze of like the pandemic, people are at home, content creators are out there, and people are just bored. They were digging up dirt on Eminem, and people were trying to cancel Eminem. People that were like younger than us, like 16-year-old girls would be on TikTok playing lyrics of an Eminem song from like 2008. Be like, oh my god, we have to get rid of this guy. I can't believe he was like the top artist in the world. And it's just the reality of the situation is there's edges to everyone, and you just there's people that have hit a certain level, and especially with Ric Flair, somebody who has so much equity with like the older generation. You just can't cancel someone like that. It's not going to go through because there's too many people respect him and too many people think too highly of him.
I feel like there's like a just real quick. I'll close with this. I feel like there's like a balance and like a fine line with that as far as like one where the person's got to in their industry, like their stature, their status, their legacy, their achievements, that type of thing, is that. And then it's kind of I guess, the issue and like the quote unquote cancelable offense. Like if someone's, let's say, God forbid, if they're like someone's into like pedophilia, for instance, or something, that's right there. Like they're just wiping out altogether. Start F them, like get rid of them, jail, etc. If it's like, oh well, Eminem used this word in a song. Oh, cancel him, rip his whole legacy down. Like that's a joke. That's crap. But like if Eminem did something far worse, if he killed someone and did blah blah, then it's completely justifiable to kind of rip the legacy down more. Like, it really does depend. There's a fine balance there. It's how you view canceling. It's all this type of stuff. But at the end of the day, Kevin, when it comes to Ric Flair, what he's done, these crimes, so to speak, quotes around crimes, these things, these cancelable offenses, with regardless of where his legacy was, and how he's seen, these offenses, Kevin, they're not doing enough to objectively, in everyone's minds, just wipe him out as an all-time great. It's not there. Like, really.
Yeah, absolutely. At the end of the day, Ric Flair is going to be remembered as one of the best to ever do it. And yeah, I guess that we can close this episode of Elite Heat right there on that note.
Mm-hmm.